Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday. Of course, it's Wednesday. It's April 24th, 2024, and we are discussing what you should be bringing in your gear bag this week on Coastal Drone Weekly Live. My name's Ian. We've got Jen and we've got Finn, and we're from Coastal Drone, and we are going to be covering what is in our gear bag. So let's get to it. All right. So first off, we're going to go through the legal requirements, and then we're going to go through practical, storage, data management, and we're going to open up some questions. So first off, let's cover the legal requirements. So this is going to be everything that you need in terms of paperwork, documentation, standard operating procedures, checklists, everything else. So let's go through the list we've got here. First is going to be your pilot certificate. If you're flying a drone that weighs 250 grams or more, you're going to need either a basic or an advanced. What type of license do you need to have for commercial operations?
Advanced.
No, that's a common misconception.
What?
Yeah, it's actually either you can run drone businesses with either a micro, a basic, or an advanced. Where the advanced becomes something that matters is proximity to airports or proximity to people, exactly, or controlled airspace. So this is something we get asked all the time, and there's tons of people out there that get it all the time. It's a common misconception. You do not need in Canada an advanced pilot certificate to run a drone business. You can fly with a basic if it's suitable for the operation that you're going to be doing. In the States, however, you need a Part 107, right? So that's the commercial small drone or small UAS operator certificate.
In Canada, as long as you're flying legally, you're allowed to collect money for your work.
Exactly. Or fly for reward or fly for the furtherance of a business. In the States, it's like if you want to fly, even YouTube is considered a commercial activity. So it's something you got to watch out for. Proof of recency. So in Canada, every 2 years, you need to do something that is a good way to maintain your recency, and you have to carry proof of that. So, and what we're going to say real quick is everything that we're talking about here can be either electronic or it can be on paper as well. So you carry a binder or something like that for backup.
Or both.
Or both. Yeah. And honestly, both is the best. If you're going to be working out in the field, use Google Drive or Google Docs and store everything on that, but then also print it off and have a backup binder in case you can't get access to the internet from where you're flying. Your drone, 250 grams or more, needs to be certified, and you need to carry your certificate of registration. That registration should be matching the serial number of the drone you're flying and up to date. Sometimes they change. So one of the things you can find is like the safety assurance declaration, the next thing we're talking about here. It can change. We've talked about this in past episodes. We did one full episode just on safety assurance declarations. There's 3 different checkboxes on a certificate of registration, one for near people, one for over people, and one for controlled airspace. That may or may not change. You'll get an email from Transport Canada if you're the registered owner, and that checkbox needs to be valid and current. So if you don't have the current C of R for your drone, your paperwork isn't complete.
The other thing about the certificate of registration is the registration number needs to be written on the aircraft.
Well, and in some sort of easily visible fashion. It can be on or in the aircraft, like inside the battery door in a way that as long as you don't need tools to get at the C number. But if you put it inside a battery compartment, there is a risk that it either gets snagged with the battery, like on the new Mavic 3s, the battery slides in and out, it could get caught on the battery and get ripped off or cause a jam to be careful where you choose to put it. But it doesn't need to be permanently etched into the drone. You need a copy of the drone manual. So this can be, again, electronic is probably the most practical, but accessible. If you're running enterprise drones, it's actually built into the smart controller. So you can always grab the latest version as long as your software and firmware is up to date. And then you're going to need your normal checklist, your emergency checklist, and your site survey checklist. So these are requirements. All of the stuff that you see here is these are must bring to your flight review, for one example. And they are requirements that must be on hand or available for any routine drone operations. So one of the things, like the big chunk of what we do in the flight review is go through all your documents and make sure they're current, valid, yours, and meet the compliance requirements for the 90123 is the reference for the cars.
90123 for normal and emergency, 90127 for site survey.
That's right. And to read more about the site survey requirement, we just did an episode 2 weeks ago, so you can check that one out. We've got lots of walkthroughs on the site survey process.
What we just covered there, those are like the bare minimum legal requirements to fly legally. Everything that we're going to talk about now is not like a legal requirement, but a very, very good idea. As per the cars, if something appears in your packing list or appears in your SOPs, you need to have it with you on site every time. If I write in my packing list, which I think my packing list does, that I need a first aid kit, if I leave the house without a first aid kit, I'm not flying legally. There might be some instances where it is not practical to bring everything. So this is where you want to use the phrase as required. This could be an example of a packing list. So for example, fire extinguisher, charged and located. We've got the fire extinguisher. First aid kit, located. We know where the first aid kit is. But cones and landing pad, we're going to deploy as required. If it says as required, then you have more discretion. You can use your discretion when packing. You can use your discretion when setting up the site. If my checklist said cones and landing pad deploy, then I have to deploy them even if it doesn't make sense to deploy them or it's not practical to deploy them.
Question here we've got from Boyko. Does using a microdrone relieve any of the certificate requirements when it comes to commercial work?
Yes. So if you read the regulations, the only thing that applies to microdrones is 900.06, which means that you could rock up with no documentation at all or anything.
Microdrone operations, there is no certification requirements at all. You're basically operating under best practices recommendations. The only hard and fast rules are not flying in restricted airspace and flying unsafely.
These next slides, these are all just kind of like categories of items for like different scenarios or different ideas. So this first one is for incidents and accidents. So you want to have a first aid kit, a fire extinguisher or fire blanket, and then the incident or accident log and contact information if it's required. Now, the note about emergency equipment as per the cars, if you bring emergency equipment, your crew needs to have or needs to know where it is, how to operate it. So you can get a little fire extinguisher like this. We've got the Coastal Drone tickle trunk down here, and so we can be pulling some stuff out of it as we go on.
Most of the stuff lives in my car, so that way it's always ready to go.
Fire extinguisher versus fire blanket. What's the difference?
Well, a fire blanket is going to contain the heat and contain the spread. It's not necessarily going to suffocate. Like, we're dealing with batteries here. So batteries are exothermic reactions once they get punctured. Any oxygen they're going to expose, they're going to go off, right? So you can't put out a battery fire. All you can do is contain the spread of the fire. So a fire extinguisher is great for putting out something that's got a fuel source that can be, talk about the fire triangle, right? You've got fuel, you've got oxygen, and you've got heat. Take one of those away, you're going to kill the fire. In this case, we can't because it's a battery. Everything's inside it other than oxygen.
You want to be seen when you're on the job. So high-vis vest, some sort of apparel, cones or tape, and maybe even a sign.
Yeah, so a sandwich board is a good idea. You can take like one of those wet floor sandwich boards and repurpose it with a sign or something that says caution drone operation in progress. You want to clearly demarc your safe area that you're going to be working, especially if it's like a busy area. Like the high-vis is definitely something that you want to have. It's not required for the flight review. So many of our candidates come with it. It's a great idea because it shows that you've put a lot of planning and foresight into your operation. But the high-vis is not a pass or fail. But it certainly goes a long way to alleviating any kind of bystander interactions as well. If you've got some potential for like a hostile walk-up person that's wondering what you're doing. Yeah, looking the part is 90% of your operation, I think, when it comes to working in an urban area. Signage should be branded, right? You're doing a job. You really want to keep marketing, right? Either you get a wrap on your vehicle, you get a sign, you get some sort of thing, and then that comes into, carry some collateral with you as well. So if you have some marketing material, some stickers, business cards, always have that handy, right? Because one of the best marketing tools is getting out and doing business. It's kind of the same in the helicopter world. Like one of the best banners for a company is to see the aircraft flying because it means they're doing business and people see that. So if you've got your drone out and you're flying, you're looking smart and you're looking the part, it's going to go a long way to getting you follow-on business potentially in the same area. So dress smart, be visible, like brand your stuff. You could potentially wrap your drone with your branding if you want as well, or at least have a sticker on it. Just be considerate of any safety assurance declaration implications that wrapping your drone might have. So be cautious on that. Like you don't want to be covering sensors or anything, and make sure that makes sense. Fuel requirements. This is actually not just a nice to have. This is a car's requirement. You must have sufficient energy or fuel to complete the flight as planned. So enough batteries. DJI sells the Fly More kit. I don't recommend buying a drone that isn't including the Fly More kit these days. By the time you get around to buying more batteries, you already needed more batteries. So when a new drone comes out, buy the 3 battery kit. Right? It makes more sense. You're not going to be running around trying to trade off, well, do I have enough? And the other advantage with the Fly More kit is it often comes with a multi-charger, which then with the latest generation stuff, you can charge one battery from the remnants of other batteries in the pack. So it's got a self-balancing capability. So if you're out on a job, you've finished all 3 batteries down to 40% or whatever your comfort minimum is for the energy in the pack, because you don't want to be flying them to 0% or even 10%. Like the drone's going to land immediately at that level. But if you fly them all to 40%, and suddenly, like the customer's like, "Oh, just one more shot. Can we do it? It's just one more shot." Okay, give me 10 minutes. All your other batteries are going to be balanced charging, and it's going to charge the highest charge battery in the pack. So if you have one battery that's at 60%, it'll pull the other 2 batteries down to 20% each and give you another 40% potentially. I don't know exactly what it is on the new packs, but that's the theory of how it works. It takes from what's left without bottoming out one of those batteries and damaging it. Another thing that's a really good idea to have is a way to charge your batteries on the road while you're driving or while you're on the job site. There's a couple different ways you can do it. Of course, every car should have a 12-volt cigarette socket that you can charge. Those aren't necessarily going to have enough power to charge your drone batteries, though. So that's something you got to look at is the built-in port a high wattage port, or do you need a special adapter? Typically, car cigarette lighters are 150 watts. They're 10 amp fuses, so it might not be enough. If you don't have enough onboard power or USB ports that support power delivery, so modern cars now, you'll see power and it might say a plus plus beside it or a lightning bolt or PD or something like that. You want to look at how many watts that USB port is. DJI recommends you have at least a 65 watt USB-C power supply in order to charge the batteries quickly. If you don't have that and you can't get a cigarette lighter that supports that, the next best is either going to be to get an inverter installed in your vehicle. So it's something that takes 12 volts and converts it to AC power, which then you can use to power all your battery chargers. You could power a coffee maker if you're on a long job or something like that. They're going to vary based in wattage from like 1,000 watts all the way up. Or the other thing you can do is now DJI just launched this stuff is the DJI Power Series, which is a portable power supply. They make a 500 watt version and a 1,000 watt version. Basically, it's a big lithium battery pack. You can't fly with it on commercial airlines. DJI makes them, Jackery makes them. There's a bunch of different brands that make them. Typically, I've seen they're about $1 per watt hour of capacity. So 1,000 watt hour has been typically about $1,000 Canadian for these things. There are a few options out there for power packs, and you're going to spend about $500 to $700, I think, for something that's got enough that you can charge. But what I should finish on this with the cool thing about the DJI ones, they have a direct connect capability where you can plug a special cable directly into the power pack and then plug that directly into your drone's battery. And they support the Mavic 3, the Air 3. It lets you fast charge faster than any USB power supply would let you charge your drone batteries. So that's pretty cool. Communication, obviously cell phone, earbuds. If you're going to be flying with a visual observer, you need some way to be able to fly hands-free, of course. So you want these in your ear. Ideally, you want something that's got pass-through as well, so you're not isolating yourself to the world around you. Walkie-talkies. So we've got FRS or GMRS radios, like the family radio service. Those don't require a license to operate. They're on private channels. We also have a VHF airband radio in there as well. That one's seen better days, but it still works. First off, you have to have an ROCA, so a Restricted Operator Certificate Aeronautical Certification. And you also need to have a ground station license for the radio, which is a little more complicated right now because they're not really being issued for drones. Typically, you're going to inherit the ground station license of an aircraft. Industry, science, education, economic development in Canada doesn't quite support drones in the same sense. So it's a little messy right now.
But you could use these to scan without needing a certificate.
Yeah,
so
dial into the radio frequency of the nearest aerodrome that you're going to be flying. So at least you're getting your situational awareness. Mm-hmm. If you have no intent of broadcasting, you can get a scanner for less than a quarter of the price of a transmitter or transceiver. That one's, I want to guess it's $400 Canadian. You can get a scanner for about 150. So that's going to be, and scanners will work on all bands, not just air bands. General protection. So personal protective equipment, PPE. Have a general hard hat. Be cautious of the type of hard hat you buy and the color of hard hat you buy. Different color hard hats have different meanings on job sites. It might be a supervisor hat. You look ridiculous. You can take that off. This is a serious podcast. Safety glasses that are approved, right? So have polycarbonate or something like that. Gloves are going to be often mandatory on job sites. You're going to often need to have long sleeve shirts and long sleeve pants as well are going to be mandatory. The high vis vest, again, certain colors, like I have a black one I use because coastal's black, but a black one has different meaning on some job sites, so they don't necessarily want you wearing that. So it must meet the standard of the job that you're going to. And then steel toe or composite CSA approved boots. I always have a pair of boots in my car. I always have full PPE for standard job sites. So at least I've got something that's going to fit most situations available. So if I get a call, hey, we need you to go to this gravel pit. Well, I'm ready to go with PPE. I've just got to change of clothes in a bag in the car. So it's not something I need to run around and grab.
Yeah, so you need to check the weather before you go. So you either want access to the internet so that you can check the weather using an app beforehand or call for ATIS or something like this. There are some other ways that you can view on site. So one of the things you can get is an anemometer. This is just a device, there's a little fan in it, and you hold it into the wind and it will tell you the wind speed.
Yeah.
You can also get a small deployable windsock that just is a standard windsock that you can put up if you need to get really accurate on-site wind. And then for temperature, just even a simple thermometer, or you can get a sling psychrometer, which are very, very fun to use. You get more information than is necessarily required. But the thing about a psychrometer, also hard to say, is psychrometers are able to measure both the ambient temperature and the dew point temperature. So you can use that to determine the level of moisture in the air and especially if it's a day where fog is a possibility, you could use that to determine the moisture in the air.
Cold weather operations. So of course, cold weather gear, shirt, hat, toque, jacket, layers. If you're using gloves, PPE side, like you want to have something that's going to be touchscreen friendly, of course, because pretty much every drone controller has a touchscreen, or your phone or your tablet has one. Boots we've already talked about, but also like snow boots or something if you're working in cold weather, right? You do not want your extremities getting cold. And typically a drone operator, if you're doing a mapping mission, for example, you're going to be standing there doing nothing for 20 minutes at a time, waiting for that battery. So you really want to be prepared for the elements. Rain protection, umbrella, sunshade. It's very easy to get a sunburn while you're out running the drone. So, and not only that, it's also going to make your life easier when you're working with a screen if you're not trying to operate that screen in direct sunlight. So if you're an overlander, you already know about this, but like getting an awning for your vehicle might be a good idea because then you can pull that awning out and use that for not only rain protection, but also for sun protection. Finn's got a sunshade that's meant for a tablet. That one's designed it was more for the old Phantom, but it works for that's the Android tablet that we use for SDK stuff. Anything that can get like sunshade protection around your screen is going to make your life a lot easier, because the alternative to that is running a more powerful screen like the old DJI, the Crystal Skies. The Crystal Sky was an Android tablet with like 1,000 nit display and direct sunlight. The only way that those things would work is they take a ton of batteries and they get super hot because it's pumping out a ton of light to keep them bright enough to see in daylight. So not ideal. Also, if you rely on your phones, like even the brightest iPhone Pros, they use OLED. As soon as they get into sunlight, they drop from like their rated 1,000 nit display down to a couple hundred at most because they're OLED. And if you run them at full brightness, it's just going to destroy the screen in short order. Hot weather, hat, water bottle, sunscreen, something with electrolytes, right? Stay hydrated, carry water, have some salt, right? You do not want to get dehydrated in the sun. What happens to your human factors when you're dehydrated? What's one of the risks of being dehydrated as a pilot?
Lack of awareness. You can get tired, fatigued very fast.
Yeah, your decision-making goes out the window, right? If you're dehydrated and suffering from heat stroke, you're incapacitated, and you could make decisions the same effectiveness as if you were under the influence of alcohol, right? Camera gear, ND filters. So if you're using a drone with a fixed aperture, an ND filter is critical to maintaining your shutter speed or controlling the light. Microfiber cloth for cleaning your screen, cleaning your filters. Make sure that it's clean itself and kept in a bag or something like that. If you're a parent, you probably already have these in your car, but wet wipes are a must-have. And then spares. So batteries we've already talked about, but batteries for your radios, batteries for your controller, and then spare propellers. So our battery bag serves dual purpose. If we had some lipos, it goes in there, but we also have spare propellers because it's not an if, it's a when. You're going to need them at some point. So it's better to have them than not have them and then lose the entire job because you had an oopsie with a tree or something else.
And then to swap the propellers.
Yes. So I do not recommend using the DJI tools. If you have like a mini series, they came with a little screwdriver. They're very soft and can strip easily. And you want to have good quality tools when you're working with these really fine screws, because if you skip, you're going to also potentially damage the screws. So Finn's this is just a standard microelectronics kit. It's got a bunch of small bits in there. It's actually got security bits. So like the triangle and the security Torx with the center pin.
It is a Jacome.
So probably off Amazon, probably not incredibly expensive. It has a spudger as well. It's got a few other things. So there's a bunch of options in there. If you're on a job where you cannot afford any kind of downtime, say you're doing a live broadcast. So one of our flight reviewers out there, Matt, runs Blackhawk UAV. He's really kind of become the go-to specialist when it comes to live broadcast on sporting events, and he's using the Mavic 3. Talking about it with him the other day, I'm like, well, what about if you went to the Air 3? Because you get like another 10 to 15 minutes of airtime. And one of the things that, like when you're live, airtime really matters for flight time. It's like, honestly, at this point, I've got like 18 Mavic 3 batteries. I've got 2 airframes. I've got 2 controllers. It's all about redundancy and making sure that if one aircraft goes down, you have another one powered on, ready to go, unlocked if you're in a red zone as well, and everything is there so that there is no break in what's going on.
Because if you show up to the film set with one drone and your drone breaks, well, luckily you'll never have to worry about
showing up to the film set again. Exactly. Storage and data requirements. We are going to have a full podcast about this in the next couple of weeks. We've done one in the past. It's on the Coastal Drone Pro Monthly. It's not on YouTube at this point. Data management on site and back at the office are critical parts of essential gear. We've got a couple different SD card wallets. These are must-haves. These are relatively affordable. I like the left side, right side. It's why I have 2 sides and it's not a full wallet. Have a system that is easy for you to see which cards are full, which cards are empty. With SD cards, they're in a regular shape, so you can't just flip them over. So have a system in your card wallet. But these card wallets, all your cards are in one spot. You leave a job site, you know you've got all your cards back. Having a wallet is your first step towards organizing your memory cards. So it's really important that you have that in your system. Also, another one I recommend is if you're storage limited, have an SSD. So some sort of high-speed SSD. This is a USB to SSD enclosure adapter. So I'm just running like a normal, it's just a Samsung SSD inside, and it converts it to a high-speed USB, so I can run this in any computer. So if you have an SSD that you've upgraded your computer, you could throw it into something like this. These are like $40. Or you can buy a Samsung T5, T7 rugged SSD, or the SanDisk one. We're using it to record the show right now, but there's a bunch of different options. Get something that's like a terabyte, so you have storage on the go. Because if you're in the field and you're away from high-speed internet, you're going to need to be able to dump your cards, and those cards are going to need to be like, you're going to fill them fast. Storage in your laptop is really expensive. Like this Mac that I'm using right now has 500 gigs. If I wanted the 1 terabyte version, it was like another $800. Whereas all said and done, this is like $140 for 500 gigs. So that's way more effective. USB cables. So Finn's holding up. This is a $100 USB cable. It's a special tethering cable for cameras. It's rated for 10 gigabit all the way through the cable. I think it's like a 12 or 15 foot cable. That's a little overkill, but have something that is rated for full USB speed. So the USB-C Gen 3.2, but something that's rated for 10 gigabit, especially if you're flying FPV. Because FPV, if you're in an environment where it needs to be locked or unlocked, that cable is needed in order to tether your phone to the goggles to unlock the drone. And then, of course, for doing data transfer. So all the latest DJI drones have the ability to transfer at high speed using the USB-C port, not necessarily with the drone powered on, so it powers itself through the USB cable. Again, you're going to need a high speed cable. One of the indications that it's a high-speed cable is the girth of the cable. The thicker the cable is, usually it's a higher speed rating, so it's a good way. If you've got like a gas station USB cable, probably doesn't even support data transfer at all. And if it does, it's going to be like, there's more than 20 wires, I think, inside the high-speed cables, whereas like the cheap ones only have like 4 or 10. So it's something to consider. Cloud-based service. Again, this is going to come up in our next weekly. We're going to go through the entire process of data upload and management. We use Google Drive. We're well over like 20 something terabytes of raw footage, and it's working great for us. There's a workflow on how to offload and upload and check in and out of projects.
So we've got the tablet here for mapping missions, SDK. If you need to sideload anything to your controller or aircraft, it has to be done on an Android tablet. iOS is no longer supported. A power cable.
Yeah.
So you can run a power cable. Really helpful to just be able to put power somewhere. There's an umbrella in here, but it's just out of reach.
Yeah, so umbrella for sun and rain protection.
Chest strap for a controller.
If you're running a controller, you, like most DJI controllers, there's little screw holes on the bottom of it. Those are actually for putting in eyelets to put a strap system onto. So get some eyelets, put them on there, because then you can actually let the controller go down hands-free if you need to deal with your phone at the same time, or you don't have somewhere to set down the controller safely. That's what that's for. But you know what we didn't talk about is landing pads. I do a lot of my takeoff and landings either hand launching and hand catching the drone, realistically, just because most of the time we're flying the Mavic series or smaller, so it makes more sense to hand launch or catch. With the FPV drones, you want a good spot that's free of dust and flat, because it's not as easy to hand launch and catch an FPV drone like one of the DJI ones. One of the things you want to look for is it's going to be like a meter in diameter is probably ideal size-wise, but it has to have weights in the ring so that if you're landing, you're not going to pick up the landing pad and throw it at the drone because of the downwash of your drone. It's not going to blow away, so it's going to be relatively stable. As soon as you go up to like a matrice, it definitely needs to have weight to it. I've come back and landed on what was relatively heavy landing pad, and it started to fly away on me with the matrice. So that's definitely something you want to watch out for. A chair, right? So having somewhere to sit while you're if you're doing a mapping mission that takes an hour, right? Have somewhere to sit. I'll often, like when I'm doing mapping, I'll have the car nearby and have the door open with some music going or something, just to keep myself entertained while I'm standing there. Not loud enough that it's covering any situational awareness, because if you're operating in an area, you need to be able to hear airplanes and helicopters in your area as well. So you don't want to be drowning out what you're doing, but you could grab a Bluetooth speaker or something. Just like it's a job, but it's supposed to be fun, right? You're supposed to be able to enjoy what you're doing. So snacks, music, food, stuff that's not going to distract you or fatigue you while you're doing a job, because realistically, like mapping is one of the more lucrative things that you can do with drones, but it's also one of the most time consuming because you are supervising the drone for the duration of the mapping mission. This is my binder. This is my offline backup copy of all of our electronic paperwork and documentation. So everything, like I said, is in Google Drive. You can set up Google Drive to be available offline so that you have it available if you are out of cell reception. But again, it's still always good to have a paper copy. But essentially what I have is my standard operating procedures. Here's a quick peek. At the front of it, I have like, this is my checklist. And basically it's a single page SOP. So everything I need for checklist, if I have a visual observer that I'm training to be on the job, they can see what my standard operating procedures is like. Okay, can we go through the pre-flight? And then I also have the shot list available quickly to grab. So that it's like, okay, we're doing a location for real estate. Have I got everything that's on the shot list that we need? And then the VO can prompt me and be like, oh, have you done this? Have you done that? No. Okay, well, now it's on the list. So those are the two that are quickly accessible from the front of my binder. Inside, I'll have the C of R, our company insurance, all the other stuff is going to be in there as well. So if we got ramped, right, by transport or something else, that would show up. Like I've got all my documents and everything available for them to scrutinize and go through. And same with anyone else. It's like a random or something that comes up and says, prove to me that you can legally operate here. And if I get challenged on it or something, then I've got that available. All right, so that's pretty much it for essential gear. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this week on another episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. Please let us know what else you think we should be carrying in our gear, anything we've missed or something that you have that's a must-have. If you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, thanks for joining us again. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. If you do have something else that you want to add to the list, or like I said, for our community members, please hit us up in the comments. We read everyone, and we're happy to chat further about drones and anything related. See you again, guys. Thank you so much. What else have we got in the box there, Finn?
Yes, I was just checking, and there was one other thing in the box.
Okay. It's not essential gear.
Not essential gear, but pretty cool gear. So here is our brand new, fresh from the factory, Avata 2.
Thank you. All right, so I guess we'll do a little bit of an unboxing since everyone's here at the same time. We're going to do a more formal video, but I just picked this up on the way in. So this is the DJI Avata 2, and this is the third generation DJI FPV drone. So week before we did FPV, just before this was launched. Was excited for it to come out, but we didn't really have access to it yet until now. Shipping was a little bit of a challenge. So
when we talked to FPV, it wasn't even officially announced yet.
That's right. And we didn't know it was coming.
No.
No inside track or anything, of course. So let me move this out of the way. Well, this is not going to work, is it? I cannot see myself on the screen because then I just end up looking at my laptop the entire time. It makes for a really poor presentation. So, yeah, let's get some tools so we can do a quick unboxing. That is not a knife.
No.
But it'll work.
Yeah, I thought it was more of a spudge, but
it is kind of. So
This is so fun.
So main updates, and we're gonna do it won't be really a true unboxing, but because honestly, if you want to see an unboxing of the Avata 2, at this point, this thing's been out for a week or two now. There are, the standard bunch of YouTubers that get the early access. So there's no shortage of unboxings. But this is the Avata 2 Fly More combo. So you get two boxes. As we've got the drone, which comes with the drone, the goggles, and the motion controller 3. And then Finn has got the RC remote controller 3. So the remote controller 3 is required to enable manual flight, whereas the handheld controller is only useful for the automated flight modes. So, and basically the reason there's a new controller is because now the Avata 2 is running OcuSync 4, which is the latest generation of video and control transmission. So slightly different controller. It doesn't have any external antennas anymore.
It's like hermetically sealed bag here. I think this needs a scissors. Let me see.
Just use a screw bit.
Okay.
I'm just going to say now, this is probably the first and last time we're going to be wearing these headphones. Yeah, so out of the box, it doesn't have, like, the control, what do you want to call them? The sticks themselves are embedded into the base of the handles. You pull those out and you would screw them in. And then this controller supports two different modes. So you can run it in throttle mode or you can run it in return to center mode. So on the back of the controller on the left side is a little screw that you can adjust to unlock the friction. So it's behind the rubber pads in the back there. So, but no more external antenna. The mode switches are all the same. Otherwise, it's got the same amount of buttons, but they just made it a little bit more compact. It's got the center pin holder, so you can put a neck strap on it to hold it when you're doing something else. So that's kind of cool. So that is the controller, and then here's the box for the Avata 2. And the Avata 2 comes in a leather carrying case, which is nice. Well, not leather. It's probably vegan leather or vinyl or something. So, and important with any drone, like if this is your first DJI drone, inside the box is going to be a QR code for registering the drone and for watching the tutorials and going through the settings. So you need to get a DJI account set up before you can fly a drone, especially something like this, because you're going to be range and distance and altitude limited. But this bag's pretty nice. It's kind of similar. It looks a little similar to the one that came with the Mavic 3. It's a lot smaller. Actually, the Mavic 3 bag was like a laptop bag. It was a really heavy-duty bag. So you've got a bunch of different compartments in here. Finn, you got it. Sorry, you're done with that now. I just realized that all I could hear was you crinkling plastic over there. So everything I just said, probably no one could hear. I'm sorry about that. So the bag is self-contained for the Avata. It looks like there's enough room for the controller to go in here as well. And then you've got the drone sealed in a bag. I'm not going to torture you guys with that, but we'll wait for the actual full video of everything. But drone's in there with propellers. There is a battery in the drone already. The goggles, these are the new 3rd generation goggles, or 4th. The naming system for the goggles is pretty rough. So there was DJI original FPV goggles. Sorry, I'll just open them because these are kind of cool and you got to see these. So the new goggles have, there's a bunch of foam in here as well. That's good for protecting it. Don't lose that. An integrated battery. So the battery goes on the back to help balance out the weight. And it has a head pad, and then the goggles will adjust a little bit so that you can adjust them for comfort. This material is quite a bit softer than the material the original was. Like the 2nd generation goggles had a really hard plastic on the bridge that was really painful to use for long periods of time. So I honestly haven't flown the Avata 1 too much. They moved the micro SD card slot in between your eyes. That's kind of weird. And then the other cool thing is they have pass-through lenses on the front now. So you can actually you can use AR, augmented reality pass-through. So if you want to see what's around you, you can do that with the goggles. And we're going to test that out and see how good that is in the video to come. And figure out a way to show the pass-through. Because it's kind of like the Apple Vision Pro has augmented reality pass-through. I'm not sure if this is as good as or same or different. So that's one thing I'm really curious to see. And we're going to do an in-depth testing on that. Also in the box, you get the new motion controller. And I forgot to bring the Avata 1 motion controller, but this is the 3rd generation motion controller. So the way this works is this is a throttle, or your trigger for throttle and backwards. And then you fly the drone like you're flying an airplane or a joystick. So you've got pitch up, pitch down, left, right. And then you've got controls for the gimbal, for angle, start, stop button. And also you can use this as an augmented reality wand in the goggles to point at stuff in the menu. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of like an old Wiimote. So there's that. And then there's the new battery charging pack. The battery charging pack So remember I was talking about the, now there's a system where you can cross-charge the batteries. So you've got, if you have 2 batteries, these haven't been activated, so they're stone dead right now. But if you hold this power button down, you can transfer power from 2 of the weaker batteries to the most charged batteries. This is nice. They're now a slide-in type battery, whereas the last generation was an awkward kind of like XT, like double-pin power connector. So it was really tough to get them in and out, whereas this is more like a Mavic. All right, we'll unwrap the drone. We'll unwrap the drone. All right, so the Avata 2 is slightly, dang, I should have brought the one thing I didn't bring today. Of all the gear we brought today, the one thing I didn't bring was the Avata 1. I didn't know the drone would be ready to pick up this morning until now. Avata 2 is slightly larger. It's still considered, I think, a 3-inch airframe. So the props are roughly 3 inches or less in diameter. The last one was 2.7, but the battery, like I said, slides in and out off the back. The Avata 1 had a bit of an issue where the battery would eject on a crash. This one feels more solid. We'll see. I'm definitely probably going to crash it at some point, so I'll let you know. A USB port has been moved to the side. This is a huge improvement over the Avata 1. The battery compartment, or sorry, the SD card slot is, it's in the same one. I just had my hand over it. So now the SD card and the USB port are both easily accessible, whereas it used to be they were inside the propellers and you had to shove your thumb and finger in there and get at it. That is way better. This drone also supports direct connect. So you plug it into your laptop, it'll directly transfer the data across at pretty high speeds. I don't know if it's full speed, but like the memory card's only rated for so much speed. So it's going to be, I think, as fast as the memory card is rated. They've gone from a downward facing propeller, like a pusher, to a puller. So the propellers are facing upward. Aerodynamically, it's a little different. And then one of the main improvements is the camera system on the Avata 2. Squeeze. Is now the same sensor that is in the Air 3 and the Mini 4 Pro. So it's a bigger, it's the same size sensor, same size lens, but it's using, they call it backside illuminated. So it's got a much better performance in low light and higher quality color. And they've also enabled D-Log M on it. So it supports true 10-bit video with a log color profile, whereas the last one used D-Cinelike, which is just basically a flat desaturated kind of color picture profile. So this is going to be much closer to like the top end GoPro Hero style color. You don't necessarily need to run an external camera on this. The idea is you can fly this with the camera it comes with and get professional results out of it. So we're going to do a back-to-back test of the Avata 2, the Avata 1, the DJI FPV original, and then also we'll throw in a GoPro Hero 10 for image quality comparison. And then we're going to also, in the process, we're going to modify our Avata 1 with the 3.5-inch propeller mod from Axis Flying, which means the propellers are larger, and in theory, it's supposed to make the airframe more stable and a little quieter, because one of my main complaints with the Avata 1 is the noise. It was very shrill and very anxiety-inducing to fly because it's just so obnoxiously loud. So this is already quite a bit quieter from what I've seen on comparison videos, but we're going to try and do a little bit of a scientific test. We'll get everything set up on a constant tripod with a mic and everything and see if we can kind of show you the difference. We're going to have to find the spare props for the Avata because we have aftermarket props on it right now trying to get the noise down. So I'll also do a back-to-back with that, but we'll get the stock props back on it. In the top of the bag, it looks like you've got some spare propellers and some other stuff in there as well. We'll go into more detail about that later. And then it's got a pouch. It's got a strap on the side and a couple pouches. So it's actually, this is the first decently sized bag that comes with the Fly More combo. The last ones were just barely enough to get everything in. I see just enough room to also get, because you could put the motion controller here and then you could put the remote controller in there. So that's actually pretty good. So yeah, excited to get this thing in the air, and we'll definitely share a full video on that and share our findings from that as well. So other than that, that's pretty much it for this week. We are right at time. Thanks, Marshall, for testing out the free camera there. So
it looked pretty good, actually.
It did. It's also, that one camera is about 5 times the value of all 3 of these cameras combined. So,
And it's also the camera operator.
and it's the operator. Okay, sure. Your camera takes good pictures, Marshall.
Yeah.
That's like the most insulting thing you could say to a videographer.
Yeah.
All right.